Concealed inside the hallowed stone walls of the Vatican is more than just a representation of faith, strength, and hidden secrets hundreds of years after the embalming of saints, employing techniques from ancient Egypt to the preservation of fabled riches from the civilization of the Nile and many others. These are still hidden in the darkness. 7 terrifying secrets still unsolved confined inside the Vatican's core. Therefore, buckle up as we dive in. The mystery of the day. But first, you'll have amazing luck if you're interested in, and before watching this video, subscribe. Concludes the first section, the hidden remnants of Alexander the Great. For more than 2,000 years, people have looked for solutions for one of the biggest riddles. In the past, the funeral and last where Alexander the Great is buried, despite hundreds of thousands of searches. His grave has never been the subject of hypotheses discovered, but in accordance with an odd and bold theory, the response might not lay buried beneath Egypt's dunes or among Alexandria's ruins, rather than might be discreetly concealed in the heart of a Catholic basilica in Venice. Honored in the name of Christianity saint, according to this belief, after Alexander passed away in 323 BCE, his body was deposited in the city of Alexandria that turned become a king's pilgrimage location and monarchs for many centuries, but by time's progression and the waves of historical unrest, his body was taken by a Venetian businessman and transported illegally to Italy, as well as in an instance of misidentification. Later, it was determined to be the remains of Saint Mark the Evangelist was thereafter preserved in Venice's Basilica di San Marco. History is frequently characterized with incomprehensible gaps in which Alexander's body would disappear completely from the history record. Is challenging for many academics for millennia to accept the placement of his tomb was well known as a location that was frequented by tall individuals such as Julius Caesar and Augustus, but in only a few generations, all evidence of it appeared to disappear as if purposefully removed. Historical account of the mummy at St. Mark's Basilica is genuinely the property of Alexander. This is more than just a case of misidentification. It would be a worldwide concealment of historical proportions, and whether the theory is correct then pious for hundreds of years. Unknowingly, Christians have provided prayers in front of the body rather than but an emperor's Christian missionary who once burned the entire earth with a part 2 of Fire of Ambition and Glory Horus theory. During the lengthy course of religious tales throughout human history have served as the basis for culture and ethics, but occasionally those very tales stun us with striking parallels, so much that they contradict what we believed we were aware of. One of the biggest all of the disputed theories indicate that Jesus Christ's tale might not be completely original rather than a retelling of a much ancient story about the Egyptian deity Horus, as academics and scholars working in the symbolics field. For thousands of years, people worshipped Horus. Prior to the spread of Christianity, there was a life characterized by striking similarities to it. Was claimed that Jesus Horus was born of Merit, a virgin mother, an historical form of the name Mary. Iseb was the name of the earthly stepfather, which is also a deity's name in Egypt. The cave where Horus was born was an angel declared that a star had appeared in 3 shepherds and the sky arrived to make the payment. Their honors when Horus became an adult. He was christened in a river by the individual who conducted the baptism and was subsequently put to death. During his holy lifetime, Horus at 12 he healed the sick and exiled his disciples. Demons and even brought the dead back to life. And then Horus, as though constrained by the cadence of fate, was deceived, crucified, and buried for 3 days and brought back to life. If that all seems awfully familiar to you, are distant from only the parallels between the Horus and Jesus life and myth have inspired numerous contemporary researchers to pose the challenging, are these merely coincidences? Or are they intentional extensions? Retellings of ancient tales through the of a new age. Naturally, the conventional scholarly community, particularly the Church, has categorically rejected this theory. Some according to Egyptian literature, Horus had not all 4 of the disciples were born in a cave and was not formally baptized, although nevertheless, the parallels that do exist are sufficient to warrant further investigation into the development of faiths and the sanctity of symbols reappear throughout the ages. Section 3. The Library of Alexandria during the heyday of ancient civilization tucked up amid the white. There formerly were stone roadways in Alexandria, standing what many people thought was the largest knowledge base humanity had ever. It was produced by the library of according to Alexandrian mythology. The library was established during the 3rd century BCE while the Tmic dynasty was in power. Academics from all over the world, India, Greece, Persia, and Babylon came together here to learn, instruct, and protect tens of thousands of manuscripts, keeping track of everything from astronomy to from philosophy to mechanics. Medicine from the past to more than 400,000 scrolls of poetry was originally thought to be the core of human intelligence, but inexplicably, almost none of it is left. Some people today accuse Julius Caesar of that when he burned his own vessels in 48 BCE, when Egypt was under siege, that the city was engulfed in flames that consumed. Others think that the library is in the midst of chaos. Religious fanatics demolish the library considering old knowledge as heretical. Yet another idea puts forward that there was no destruction of the library and not a single disaster, but instead steadily and purposefully disassembled by those who aim to manage the totality of human comprehension between the whispered stories that have been passed down through the ages. One theory remains valid independently. It implies that some of the greatest works on old scrolls that are valuable maps of medicine, cosmic philosophy, and nevertheless, uncharted continents were never destroyed rather than being covertly moved to Europe and eventually discovered, making their way into the confidential records of the Vatican has never neither confirmed nor refuted this. But individuals who have examined its legendary repository that there are a lot of secret rooms protected, holding documents from the Renaissance and medieval periods and perhaps from even earlier times. Section 4. The Pope's Egyptian Museum. Gregory around 1839, at a period when Europe continued to be fascinated by the legacy. Pope of the ancient Egyptian civilization. 16th century Gregory V created one of the world's most distinctive museums. The Gregorian Egyptian Museum is tucked away and inside the Vatican's gates. There are 9 galleries in the rooms of worship, including figurines of Egyptian antiquities. The stone steles of the gods are engraved with mummies and hieroglyphs created by the time has gone by. Yet one query has remained in many people's thoughts. How did the riches of a society situated? Rome is thousands of miles away, living in a Holy See museum. The response is one that generates a lot of uneasy. They were the spoils of domination and conquest. The beginnings of this extensive collection has roots in a private archive after the individual's research regarding Pope Pius II and the late Ram Palace. But the narrative really starts after the Roman Empire's defeat in 31 BCE. Mark Antony and Queen's partnership at the Battle of Cleopatra. Action. The relics from that time on of Egyptian culture were captured by Romans as war trophies. Statues of sacred mummies, stone columns, gods, and all were transformed into opulent ornaments for Roman aristocrats. When the Gregorian Museum first welcomed visitors, and many saw the 19th century as an admirable move to exchange information and keeping the past intact. But under the warm, the exhibition hall's radiance is far away. These relics, less comfortable truth, were transported from a far-off place back through the authority and blade of individuals who had triumphed. And today, while Egyptians today are still fighting for returning what was previously taken from such historic artifacts from their homeland, stay in peaceful rest in your heart. Vatican officials who were silent witnesses to when appropriation was covered up by the name of Part 5 of preservation. The prohibited Jesus lessons in a forlorn piece of garbage pile under the sun-drenched winds of Egypt amidst decomposing papyrus fragments. Invoices for purchasing of donkeys and fifth archaeologists created century-old tax documents. An incredible finding, an odd ancient Greek manuscript that small dots that separate each syllable as despite having been ready for a reading lesson in primary school. But the shock originated outside of the writing's format. But it was a fragment based on its content of an old manuscript referred to as the First James's Apocalypse is not included in the biblical canon, which has long been denounced by the Church as heretical. As per academics, it is a component of the prohibited statements said by Jesus that were never uttered in public at church, referenced in catechisms and prohibited by being replicated for ages, and the reason behind if such a text is outlawed, the response can tremble. The basis of numerous long-held convictions because in this post-apocalyptic perspective, the universe is depicted not as a divinely inspired, yet as a jail designed by a deceptive deity, a strong being who is rather than being the father of light, liar who created the physical world. The human spirit being imprisoned is a perspective that questions the very foundation of conventional wisdom, a viewpoint so bold that it denounced the transmission to successive generations of Part 6 of suppression. 2 phony mummies in the Vatican is located deep within itself. A silent room with 2 maintained forms presented solemnly underneath. For centuries, they were used as protective glass. Thought to represent evidence from ancient mummies of the Church's interest in the Egypt's mythical civilization, was long acknowledged that these were the remains of people who had previously lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. Yet during a recent scientific analysis carried out in collaboration with Smithsonian, the truth came out of the institution, and it was very different from what everyone had anticipated when specialists examined the DNA from pieces of bone that are still enclosed and they discovered the linen wrappings. And it's amazing that these mummies didn't come from ancient Egypt at all. Rather, there were a man's remains as well as a woman who has lived throughout the only roughly 500 years ago, during the Middle Ages, period when Europe was going through significant changes in the religious conflict and pandemic. This discovery led to a disturbing query: who was responsible for this? And why the solution might be found in an odd cultural fever that afflicted Europe in the 19th century. During this time, mummy mania was a prevalent event whereby mummies turned into treasured items on exhibit in museums, drawing rooms used by the nobility, and even pulverized to be used as so-called medication in this environment. The need for mummies increased to the point that some people were prepared to make up historical deaths to appease the strange aspirations of the wealthy, and maybe the Vatican and the religious become the unwitting guardian of two like part 7 of frauds when saints don't. Decline in Catholic traditions. The body's incorruptibility after death has long been seen as a possible indication of utter sanctity in previous 4 generations. This kind of thing was seen as nothing less than incredible. But within the Vatican and more over time, somber reality has gradually illuminated a large number of saints whose bodies stay intact because of their state, not to supernatural intervention, but to the purposeful mummification strategies and tactics that were directly influenced by the rites to burial in ancient Egypt. Among the more notable instances is the Pope John XXIII Rhodes body, who passed away in more than 50 years have gone by since 1963. Nevertheless, when one looks at his remains lying in a glass casket within the Vatican, it's hard not to be surprised. He seems nearly unharmed by time, appearing to be soundly sleeping, and numerous scholars consider slumber sacrosanct. His preservation is due to contemporary the embalming operations that were performed covertly by the Vatican over numerous. From 1975 until 2008, a secret team of experts at the Vatican is thought to have preserved at least 31 saints and well-known church leaders. This is not conjecture. Rather, it is an established. Despite this, the Vatican has never publicly talked extensively about the practice, but not all of the attempts were successful when in 1958, Pope Pius I, the 12th, passed away. Was embalmed with the intention of imitate Jesus Christ, burial enclosed in a linen bag and sealed in a confined area. His body was designed to stay intact, but the outcome was a disastrous failure that the body released a guard apparently fainted due to a bad smell from the Pope's nostrils, and the stink declined to the extent of alienation. Nevertheless, the Vatican has persisted in maintaining the idea of the incorrupt body. Whether accomplished naturally or for some fake ones are the greatest respect, but for other people it poses a concerning query. Does influencing nature to create an emblem of the miraculous in the end betray the very religious spirit it wants to show respect for what you just heard? You take a moment to consider the deceased historical mysteries. Don't be afraid to leave a comment with your ideas below. And if you want to carry on with this, join us as we explore hidden truths. Make sure to subscribe for more untold stories. You activate the alert bell. I'll see you in the next tale.